Anyway, so to get started, the reason why I decided to do a show about racism and disease is I'm sure a lot of you have noticed that there has been a bit of an uptick in racism, right, towards people who are Asian, right? People who are Chinese, but also racists don't have any specificity. Anybody who's slightly Oriental will get the same racism. Like if you're from China, if you're from Korea, if you're from Vietnam, doesn't matter. There is an uptick on racism to them. And so I decided to talk about it. And I'm going to start off by talking about the racism calendar. Now, the racism calendar is not what it might sound like, right? It's not a calendar which tells you when to be racist, right? It's not a calendar which has, oh, look, it's Blackface Friday coming up. Oh, look, there's no such thing as white privilege weekend. No, it is not like there's N-word November and things like that. The racism calendar is actually, it's run by a charity. Let me just tell you the name of the charity. It's run by a charity called IRRC, I believe is what they're called. They're called IRRC, and what they do is they keep a track of all the racism going on all over the world, right? Because a lot of people say there's no racism, it's all in people's heads. So what they do is anytime there's an article or there's something horrible that happened in the world that's race-related, they list it, right? And then people can look at it and people can, mobilize to combat it and stuff like that. And so there's a racism calendar, right? And I got to tell you, not to brag, but until like last year, I got to tell you, black people, we were all over the show. We were dominating, right? Dominating the instances of racism. Just generally, I got to tell you, every single month, black people on the top of receiving the racism. Things like there was a British advisor to the government last year. An article came out where he's talking about how black people have lower IQs than white people and things like that. And, there's so many incidences, black people being stopped by the police, being beaten by the police, being shot by the police. Well, black people were running the show. And then this year, there's a new player. There's a new player in town. The Chinese are taking over, man. The Chinese are taking over, right? They're taking up spot. Now, of course, this is because of the coronavirus. It's created an uptick in racism. And so I'm going to talk about it. Because as much as I don't like being number one on the racism charts anymore, I don't want anyone else to be on the racism charts. Now, it is something which, the second thing I'm going to talk about is it's their moment. Because there are lots of racist groups who I feel have seized this moment, right? Because I think we'd got to the point that racism was no longer acceptable. When I was a kid, people used to say lots of racist stuff. In the 80s, it was kind of, not that it was fine, but it wasn't ever a big deal. No one was losing their jobs because of racism, right? People were just, it was like kind of like an accepted part of society, which maybe wasn't nice. But gradually, people came harder and harder on racism. And now, racists, if they've got racist thoughts, they'd keep them to themselves, right? There were a few nutters who'd come out and bring out their racist motto and stuff like that. But overall, if you say something racist, you would get in trouble. But now, when this epidemic has come, right? In fact, anytime there's an epidemic, anytime there's like a terrorist bombing, anytime something negative happens, I feel like all the racists are chilling and they suddenly just start hearing, you only get one shot. You know what I mean? Like the song starts coming on. This is my moment. This is my moment. And they step up and they bring out their hate. This is the only moment where they can brag that they are right, because usually we ignore all of their nonsense. Oh, the immigrants are dangerous. Oh, the immigrants are dangerous. All that blame stuff has stopped working. But when people are terrified, when people are scared, that's when suddenly they've got listeners and they all come out cheering and screaming, saying, this is our moment. So, right, in Greece, right, far-right party has now started pushing their agenda, which they've had for years, but now they've got a reason to push it, that there should be closed clamp detention centers for asylum seekers, right? People are pulling out all over Europe of open borders policies. This is their moment to seize the moment and get what they've always wanted, right? Also, it's a very odd thing because all over the place they're blaming migrants. And I'm like, poor migrants aren't the people bringing in the coronavirus, man. Poor migrants aren't flying, from... It's probably your jet-setting businessman who has more chance of bringing it into the country because he's been meeting people in multiple nations, not some person who's running away from a war zone, right? And you hear such things. And one of the funniest things I read an article. I hate the fact that I have to research this stuff, but I read an article and it's talking about how wokeness helped spread the virus, right? People being woke. And I was like, wait, really? You honestly believe if you could still say the N-word whenever you like, right? And if you could call like gay people, whatever slur you like, you think that would have just stopped Corona? Would have been like Corona's coming up and like, oh no. This country, they can call black people and gay people and trans people whatever they like. Let me just step back and go somewhere else. It doesn't make any sense. But this is the sort of attitude which people have because they're angry and they're like, look, it's because of these. It's because of these foreigners. Because of these bastards. There's a viral video. I don't know if you've watched it, but it's some guy in London driving through the streets yelling at all of the people he sees not observing like a 2-meter no contact rule, but at the same time he's only observing the brown people who are doing it. He's like, look at these monkeys, look at these, oh, none of them's British. And then he sees one white person and he just assumes, he says, probably Polish, something like that. So racists have seized their moment. By the way, after I talk about racism, there's going to be a little interval. That's when I look at the comments. So if you have any questions, put them there with question marks and so on, and then I will answer them. Oh, Cheryl again says, keep your mic close to the keep your mic close to your mouth, please. I will try. Next, okay? Now I'm going to talk about jokes. Now, I will admit that as a comedian, I often use race in jokes, right? Race and racial stereotypes are a tool that we use. Almost every comedian, when you go into a new city, which you've not performed in before, one of the first things you ask is, who do people hate here, right? Who do people don't like? If you go into a country, you're like, what country don't they like? And usually what you're looking for is like a football rivalry, like a playful rivalry. So, for example, if someone's performing in England for the first time and he finds out that the England and the French have like an old school rivalry where they insult each other, then in any jokes which he wrote, maybe if he's an American and he used to do American-Mexican jokes, what he does is he takes that out and he replaces it with England, France. And you just do this. And usually you use harmless rivalries. I'll admit it. I've done Welsh jokes, right? They get a big laugh. Because really, when it comes to it, most people in the UK, they don't hate Welsh people. They make these silly comments just to get a laugh. And it's the same thing on the other way. Because it's playful, you can do it, right? Similarly, in Africa, I've done Nigeria jokes and stuff like that. But there was a difference. When I was performing in Singapore, right? I arrived in Singapore. And before the show, again, as usual, I said, hey, who do the Singapore people have a bit of a rivalry with so I can do jokes, right? I asked, and one of the people said, oh, it's Malaysia. It's definitely used Malaysia. And so I did my show, I did my joke, did the punchline about the Malaysians. I got a laugh, but it felt different. You know what I mean? It was like, there was a little bit of like, I don't know what I felt like, I was starting a rally or something like that. It was very weird, right? And then I found out, I did some research, and there was actual, like legit racism going on sometimes between Singapore people and Malaysians. And it made my harmless joke not harmless. It's that thing of, depending when you are, some jokes might not be the same. Like, for example, a white person doing jokes about black people, I don't think it's a big problem. If you're a white comedian, go for it. If you're a white comedian in England, go for it. Tell your jokes about black people. It's okay, especially if it's a black crowd. It's fine. We'll accept it. But that same joke, if you're in South Africa, where there's a history of apartheid, you do that same joke, not the same effect, right? So there's sometimes, in some cases, and some situations, in some contexts, where jokes aren't quite as funny because, it... Leading me to talk about how right now there is an overabundance of Chinese memes and Chinese jokes. You've probably laughed at some of these. I'm not saying they're not funny. The actual sad thing about this stuff is no matter what I tell you, a lot of these jokes are funny, right? There are people who are no longer in favor, like Bernard Manning, right? People like Roy Chubby Brown, who did a lot of racial jokes which aren't acceptable anymore. A lot of those jokes were funny. It's just people don't necessarily feel like they're right. So there are loads of like Chinese memes going around. Also, there are things which people are saying, like Donald Trump is like such a trigger happy guy. Like he's funny. And so he's talking about how every time he's actually talking about how it's the Chinese virus. One of his people said it's the Kung flu. The Kung flu is funny. Okay, we'll admit the phrase Kung flu is very funny, right? You have like a mental image of, Jackie Chan flying around. It's like Drunken Master, but instead he's like throwing around Corona. I admit these images are funny, right? But at the same time, are they irresponsible? Do they have an effect? Now, I'm not saying delete them. I'm not saying you can't laugh. Most people are intelligent enough to separate a joke from reality, right? Just because you laugh at it doesn't mean you're going to treat somebody Chinese differently. Depends, though, on the ripple effects, right? Depends on people, right? So, for example, when I went to the racism calendar, one of the things which I saw was children in Ireland, right, were teasing the Chinese kids in their class, right? They were doing games like one of them would tap the other one and say, now you have the Chinese virus. Now you have Kung flu. Where did they get these words that they're using to bully the Chinese kids, right? There's a ripple effect, right? And then you have actual cases of violence. You have people yelling at Chinese people, go back home, right? In the middle of London, a person who's grown up in London and he's being told, go back home, go back where you came from. In Exeter, a Chinese driver was assaulted, right? In Italy, an Italian teenager was kicked in the face. Filipino man was attacked. People messaged someone on Facebook saying that he hopes his daughters get raped. In Birmingham, an Asian woman was punched in the face. There's a lot of this stuff, man. It's going on. And I'm not saying it's to blame for the jokes. I'm not saying the jokes to blame. I'm just saying that in this current moment, the jokes feel a little different, right? They feel a little different. It's funnier to do a Chinese joke when no one's being beaten up, right? And then it's not just the jokes. A lot of people are talking about things. They blame the coronavirus, right, on Chinese people eating bats. Now, first thing, this is a theory. It's not yet been proved. This is a theory. Find proof, right? But people are talking about it like this is God's honest truth, man. I looked at all the articles and all the scientists. They said this is one of multiple possibilities. But even if it came from bats, right? All these people are like, oh, it's because they're dirty people. They eat bats and snakes. We all eat some messed up stuff, right? If you're a vegetarian, maybe you can make these judgments, right? But, oh, what? Cows? You think cows are cleaner than bats? And you're eating your steak? Do you remember mad cow disease? What about pigs? What about pigs if you're not a Muslim and you're eating your pork? What about swine flu? Oh, chicken. Oh, chicken. What? I love Nando's. I love KFC. Oh, what about salmonella? Essentially, no matter what you're eating, these diseases occur in nature. They jump to humans, right? Right? People talk about how HIV possibly was in monkeys and then it jumped to humans. Ebola jumps. This is what happens. You can't blame it just on the culinary practices of people, and it probably wasn't even the eating of it. People say it was probably, if it did happen there, it was because of the open markets and the way that the markets were. Anyway, all I'm saying is people have jumped on this. Even one of the suggestions I got for jokes was, hey, talk about Bruce Wayne if he was Chinese. Of course, asking me to make a joke about Chinese people or something like that. It is a thing which is happening. It's rampant. You're probably enjoying it. Some of them are funny. They make you feel better, I guess, in a scary time. But at the same time, all I'm saying is I'm not saying don't laugh. I'm not saying don't share the joke. It's funny. I'm just saying we need to be aware of the ripple effects and how these things last, right? Because it's happened before. It's happened before. It's happened with previous diseases, right? It's happened with SARS. It's happened with the Spanish flu, where, people started getting attacked. It's happened with the Black Plague, where, Irish people were blamed. They started being beaten up afterwards. It lasts for years after the actual disease is around. So all I'm saying is enjoy yourselves, but we're worried, right? And then finally, of this section, I will talk about how the fact is there's also been an increase of conspiracy theories about China. People saying, oh, they created the disease. They sent the disease. They sent the disease out. They sent their people out to send the disease. You want to know why? Look at their economy and look at our economies. Their economies are doing well. Our economy is crashing. Other people are angry. Arab people are angry at the Chinese government did not reveal that they had corona early enough. They did not, they tried to keep it secret. Now, that is a valid criticism, right? But at the same time, that's the leadership in China, right? What has that got to do with some dude in London, some student who's just minding his own business, trying to become a doctor, getting beaten up by some nutter who says, hey, you Corona, get out of my country. People are also irrational. I know someone who asked me, what am I going to watch tonight, right? And I was looking at Netflix and I was like, oh, I think I'll watch Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon. And they said, don't watch Crouching Tiger, it's Chinese. What does he think? Corona's going to jump from the screen onto me? It's not how it works. But jokes aside, I will say this. I fully understand why people do this, right? It's because when something scary is going on, it feels good to have someone or something to blame, right? It doesn't feel good if you're just admitting we don't know why it's happened, it's horrible, and, blame feels good. I mean, like, when you're in a relationship, the relationship ends, it feels good if you can be to your friends, a relationship fell apart because of him, or if a relationship fell apart because of her, right? Feels good to be like, well, not my fault, it's their fault. Blame feels good. But it doesn't change the fact that the relationship is still over. Okay, now we're going to go to the suggested jokes. But before I get to the suggested jokes, let me look at the comments. Okay, here we go. Abigani says, it's so unfair. Chinese are the ones eating the meat, but we are the ones washing our hands. I'm not sure what that means because Chinese people are washing their hands too. Excellent. Oh, okay. Now I need to find a way where I can look at the comments and not disappear from the screen. You are now seeing my kitchen. Okay, how are we doing? Here we going. Okay, so we've got... you in Canada, the US, you watch me because I'm educating and funny. Thank you so much. Okay, what else do we have? Hello, Amber in Dubai. How are you doing? Good to have you here. Do we have any questions? Cheryl says the only race she knows is NASCAR. Excellent. Okay, so we've only got a few comments. So Amber says, do I regret any of my relationships? Would I do it differently? I regret all of my relationships. I have like a very shoddy record. I've had my heart broken a number of times, and I've broken a number of hearts. That's just how we roll. Okay, so we are now going to move to the jokes from audience suggestions. Okay, so we're going to start with a suggestion from @coolestlegend, who wanted a joke about luck. Okay, so it's very interesting when you think about luck, right? Because there's so many superstitions that luck is related to, right? But when you actually look into them, some of them are quite funny. Like, you may be aware of, at someone's birthdays, blow out the candles and make a wish, right? This is one which actually started. There are lots of theories about where it started from, whether it's like a prayer thing because the smoke is going up to God, or whether it came from something pagan. But either way, the funny thing I've realized is people only know half of the superstition. A lot of people, because a lot of people say to their kids, "Okay, blow the candle out. Now make a wish," and then they ask their kid, "What did you wish?" But if you actually look into the full superstition, telling someone the wish actually gives you bad luck and makes sure that the wish never comes true. So what these idiots are doing is not only are they asking the kid to make the wish, but then they're making sure the kid never gets the wish. Let them make the wish and keep it to themselves. There's so many of these. The other one, which I find kind of amusing, is there is one which is breaking a wishbone. You may be aware of this. If you break a wishbone, if you get the bigger half, you get to make a wish. And I was like, where does that come from? That's such an odd superstition related to luck. Well, it actually comes from the Etruscans. Etruscan culture felt that chickens were sacred. I didn't even know that there could be a culture who found chicken sacred. You know what I mean? Like Hindus, a cow, like that makes sense to me. A cow is a majestic creature, right? I understand, but chickens! Oh yes. Etruscans found that the chicken was sacred, but not only that, they would tell the future by watching how chickens ate grain. I would love to go to that fortune teller. Wouldn't that be much better than when you go to a fortune teller and they pull out a crystal ball or take out some tarot cards? If they're like, wait a second, and then they pull out a little chicken and they set it loose and then they go running after the chicken to tell you your future. And they're like, oh, great. The chicken just tripped over. That means you are going to meet a tall, dark, handsome woman. Oh, gosh. And then also they felt that the chicken was sacred, and they felt that its collarbone brought luck. And that is why you're fighting over the chicken collarbone. What do vegetarians use to wish for luck? That's my question, right? Can you take some bits of soy and fight over them, and whoever gets more soy is the one who gets the wish? What do vegetarians wish for? Let's move on to the next one. At Mike Cap 22 wanted a joke about nipple clamps. Okay, so I thought for a few minutes. All right. No. Actually, this is what he wrote. So at Mike Cap wrote, I thought for a few minutes for something ridiculous, and then I decided, yes, I would suggest nipple clamps. This guy clearly is trying to seem like nipple clamps just came to his head. This guy loves nipple clamps. He's probably watching right now with nipple clamps on. You bet it was the first thing that he came to his mind, pretending that he thought of it later, right? And I didn't know much about nipple clamps. Now, you're going to think I'm saying the same thing, but I don't. I had to do some research into it, right? And nipple clamps, right, are used in BDSM. That's like bondage and stuff. And it's used for activities such as breast torture, where you'd pin them on a woman's breasts and torture them for their pleasure and your pleasure or something like that. Now, I may be entirely off base with this, but I think this is like a very Western kink, right? This is a very like Western society kind of kink. I can't see someone in the village in Malawi like going up to his wife. He's taking the clothes pegs off the washing line and he's being like, okay, I got a plan, I will clip these on your nipple. The woman will be like, what are you talking about? He's like, I'm going to torture your breast. I can't see it happening. I even Googled, right? Because I was like, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe there is African BDSM, right? And so I Googled African BDSM and I got no response from Chrome, right? Google Chrome said 0 responses. So I said, maybe it's because I used BDSM. Who knows what that means? So I said African bondage, and I got very depressing images about hundreds of years of slavery, which is not what I was looking for. And in fact, maybe that's why we're not as much into the BDSM. If you're with someone and they're like, hey, can I whip you? You're like, not again. But maybe it happens. You see, this is the whole thing is with kinks, you can never know. With kinks, you can never know because people are ashamed of them, keeping them secret. So maybe in Africa, there's a whole bondage scene. I have no idea. I don't know the passwords. Let me know if it exists. Okay, let's move on. Let's move on to at Theo Fitz. At Theo Fitz wanted a joke about fitness training. Now, fitness training, I have frequently tried to join a gym, go for a weekly thing with the personal trainer. And I remember I once had a personal trainer who, speaking of bondage, they were like a dominatrix, right? She'd just be yelling at me, saying, "What's wrong with you? You're fat, right? Don't give up." Just yelling at me. And I was like, wow, this is, why am I paying to have somebody abuse me? But now, because of Corona, I'm doing all of my exercises myself. And so I have to be yelling at myself, "You fat bastard, you fat bastard, what you doing? Don't give up." And like, I've become my own dominatrix. I'm relying on apps. And I'm sure I'm not the only one who's relying on apps. There are two apps which I've been using. One of them is MyFitnessPal, right? And this is an app where you put in what you're eating, you put in how much exercise you've done, and it tells you, it kind of gives you advice. But part of the thing which I find very weird about MyFitnessPal is it allows you to friend other people so that you can see their progress. And I don't think this would help me. I'm not the sort of person who it helps me to see what someone else is doing, right? Because, for example, you know when you look in magazines and you see those before and after pictures? And in the before and after pictures, they have someone really fat, and then after they've lost a lot of weight. That's meant to motivate me. But what it actually does is I look at the fat person and I'm like, oh, really? So I can get as fat as that before being at the point of no return? I can eat quite a bit more before I get there. I thought I was at the point of no return. I'll start dieting when I hit rock bottom of the ice cream tub. The other app I use is Daily Burn. I don't know if any of you have used Daily Burn. It's a lot of sort of like videos, not like aerobics, but personal trainers doing videos, and you follow along with them, right? And I'm so shallow because I haven't done it a lot, so I should be on beginners, right? But beginners is taught by it's this lovely fellow, I guess, but the advanced course is taught by this stunning woman, and I'm such a perv. I'm like, she's my trainer. So now I'm following her, and I'm way behind. Her and all her people, they're doing their dances, they're doing their things, and I'm just there like, oh, but you're really hot. Okay, I'll admit the second one is not funny, but it is true. Okay, let us move on to the next one. I'm not sure what your at was, but someone wanted a joke about Mills and Boon novels. Now, people who are not from the UK, Mills and Boon is sort of like Harlequin. It's romantic books, like mass-produced romantic books, generally bought by women, right? And it's very interesting because I remember when I was a kid, right? I was going to school in Kenya and then in Swaziland, where they're very strict censorship laws. So there was no porn we could get, right? When I was leaving, finally they had Scope, which was like very like soft-core-ish porn. But when the first 5 years when I was in Swaziland, there was no porn allowed. There was no porn. It was a very conservative country. And I remember the only kind of sexual stuff that our adolescent selves could find was we knew in those Mills and Boon little romance books, there were sex scenes. So it would actually be us, like, but we didn't want the story. And the problem with those things, they're like 80% build up and then 2 pages of sex. But we'd be flipping through massively. There's the sex, and be reading it. And they're so, like, the writing is magnificent, right? The writing is magnificent. I found like a choice example to let you know the kind of stuff which we were getting excited by, okay? So this is a quote from a Mills and Boon novel. "Still, I could not tell where her soft skin ended and her silkiness began, and the complexity of her vagina was like another elaborate silken garment." This dude, I think, is more turned on by silk than women. He just loves silk, right? But, oh my Lord, I also love the titles of these Mills and Boon books, because there are 4 women, and you can immediately tell what professions are sexy and what professions aren't. Because titles of some of the Mills and Boon books include The Surgeon She's Been Waiting For and Staff Nurses in Love. It's all sexy doctors, huh? Why wasn't there The Plumber She's Been Waiting For, or, The Mailman in Love? Oh gosh. But at the same time, as much as I make fun of it, I do think that there is often an arrogance in people who judge people for liking such books, and people even call them guilty pleasures. People say, oh, I read it, but it's my guilty pleasure. Don't have guilt. If you enjoy it, gives you joy, keep reading it, and screw everybody else, man. I have guilty pleasures. I'm not guilty. I'm proud. I'm proud of all of them. I read Twilight. I liked it. I read Harry Potter. I'm an adult. I liked it. No guilt. The next suggestion we have is from @Tinkerbella Rose, and she wanted a joke about the Knights Templar. A joke about the Knights Templar. So, if you aren't familiar with the Knights Templar, they were a Catholic military force. They were like a Catholic Knights Order. And it's amazing when you think back at this, because back in like the 1600s, 1700s, the churches used to have like military forces. It's amazing if I think of like the local parish round the corner, if they were military, because religious people used to have badasses. They used to have badasses who were operating out of the church. I can't imagine, Pastor Smith and the deacon walking down the street as knights, right? And when you actually look at the way and the code that the Knights Templar lived, there's some very bizarre things, because they had 100 rules they followed. 100 rules. It was very things, how they eat, how they sleep. There were so many rules they followed. Things like, right, they could only eat meat 3 times a week, right? Things like that. Silence when you're eating your meals, which I don't think is a normal. I think this rule was introduced by a grumpy priest who was tired of being pestered with questions. So he was like, rule number 93, no talking during meals. Let me eat in peace. But there's one rule. One rule. They were not allowed, the Knights Templar were not allowed any physical contact with women, even their family. No physical contact. Number 1, if you're a knight, if you're a sexy knight, rolling in your knight's armor, riding on the horse, what's the use if you can't impress the ladies? Why else you gonna be a knight? But the second thing is, note, it's not just sexual contact. The Knights Templar were not allowed to touch women at all, even if they were families. So the flaw in their little system is, if you ever wanted to win a battle against the Knights Templar, just send a bunch of women, right? Just send a bunch of women. They don't need even swords, right? They can just walk towards the Knights Templar and be like, I'm going to touch you. I'm going to touch you. They're going to have to run. They did not think it through. Okay, next. Okay, we've got around 6 left. So let me take a moment to look at the comments. What have we got? I don't like the idea of luck. That's why I push it. Excellent. Meow usually does the trick, says Mulroney. What does Meow do the trick for? I did not see where I came from. What else do we have in the chat room? We've got sound like a lot of clunkers to me. Am I still broadcasting on Facebook? These are messages from quite a while back. So message me if you see me on Facebook. There we are. Excellent. Oh no! When I started reading, I think Facebook caused my screen to flip out. Well, I hope you're back. I think I'm generally having problems today because it wasn't streaming on YouTube. It's not streaming on Twitch. And now I'm finding this out. As always, it's a work in progress. Tomorrow I'll have fixed my fancy lights and I'll have fixed whatever the problem is. And hopefully eventually it will be smooth. Probably when Corona is over. When I finally have a professional stream, it'll be the day before Corona is over. So let us move on to at the Fitz, at Theo Fitz, wanted a joke about losing track of time, right? And the interesting thing about this is I feel like I am now perpetually losing track of time because of Corona. Because the thing which used to tell me what day of the week it is, what time of the day it is my routines, when I have a show, things like that, when I have a meeting. I have none of these things. I don't actually know what day of the week it is right now. Oh, wait, I know it's April 1st because some idiots were doing like little pranks online, but I don't know if it's a Monday, if it's a Tuesday, if it's a Wednesday. Every day is the same, right? I also don't know what time of day is. I wake up, right? I eat what I like, right? I can have breakfast at dinner time, right? I can eat chicken at 2 in the morning because there's nothing to keep my schedule. I'm losing all track of time, right? And the other interesting thing is, they always say things you love make you lose track of time, right? And things you hate make the time stretch. And I know every one of us has been in that situation when you're at a job you hate and you just keep looking at the clock. Every minute, keep looking at the clock, right? Or when you're in a relationship with someone who bores you and you just keep looking at the watch. Is that just me? Okay, that wasn't funny. But again, based on truth. So we move on to the next one. At KAD5N wanted a joke about Mario, Super Mario. I've got to say, I've always loved Super Mario because he is like a video game hero who is a plumber. I was talking about how Mills and Boon never gives the plumbers the love. It's amazing when you think about when you're a kid, all of the other heroes was Superman, right? Can shoot eyes like lasers from his eyes. It was Superman, Wonder Woman, and all the video games had Zelda, like someone running around with a sword. It had magicians and things like that. And then in the middle of all of them, Mario, a plumber. Only problem I have is he wasn't a realistic enough plumber for the next edition of Mario. I think they should make him more like a plumber, right? So there should be scenes where Mario jumps on a mushroom and his pants fall down and you can see his butt crack, right? There should be scenes where he's about to save the princess and then he just tells her there are going to be some hidden fees and actually he can only actually save her if she gives him some extra money so he can buy the parts that he needs to save her. I had a third one, something about making promises you can't keep. I think plumbers make promises they can keep. I may have been wrong on that one. Okay, let us move on to the next one, which is at Nishimwe. Wanted a joke about bringing report cards back to African parents. Now, I had African parents, right? And I'm sure there are exceptions, but overall, African parents are known for being strict, and mine were no exception. They were really strict. And I remember there was a time when I had bad grades. And when you had bad grades and you had the report card in your hand, it was like that scene in a horror movie when you know the monster's coming for you and you're like trying to stick your key in the car, but they're just getting closer and closer because you're walking home and you're like, oh my God. Oh my God, it's coming, and you can't do anything about it. What made it even worse in my family was even when you got good grades, it didn't mean anything because I wasn't in competition with the other kids. I was in competition with my brothers, my older brothers who had all been through school. So let's say I got the best grade in my class. Right? I got the best grade in my class, like maybe I got a B- or something like that, but all the other kids got a C. I get home and I'm like, I was first in class. They pull out my clever brother's report card, say, Taziona got an A+, and then I got in trouble, even though I was the best in class. And then I was like, but wait, I beat him at art. I got a better grade than him at art. And my parents would be like, art does not matter. It does not matter, but look what I'm doing now. Okay, let's move on to the next one. At Beb's Kingdom wanted me to do a joke about a kind of a sad subject. He wanted to talk about police abuse, and he told me a story. Right now, the way he told me this story makes me think that either he's the person in the story or he watched this because it was way too specific. So I read. Police officers in Ghana stopped a young man and girl who probably could be his girlfriend or his sister, jogging at 8 p.m. So specific. I tried to find a news article. It wasn't there. This guy was describing something he saw or was part of, right? And then he said the police officer started to hit the man. So there were a few police officers. They started to hit the man, right? And meanwhile, the girl was talking with the other policeman, gave her the phone number. And this is where at Beb's Kingdom gets very upset because he's like, what? He was being beaten and she was busy giving the woman the phone number, right? She's comfortably conversing with the police. She must be a gold digger. And I was reading this and I was like, you think she's a gold digger because she was talking to the cops while the other person was being beaten? She's just not an idiot. If you are dealing with some violent police people, right, and they're beating your boyfriend or brother up, you better be nice to them. Right? You don't want to be beaten up to or them to take out their frustration on your brother. If anything, she was flirting with them and giving them her phone number, probably gave them a fake number just to get them to stop beating him up. If it was you, and I think it was you because of how angry you were at the behavior, she's not a gold digger. She saved you. Yes, you were beaten, but you would have been beaten even more if she did not give them her number. You may have give her a call, say thank you. It also made me think about moments when I've had interactions with the police. And look, I'm black. I'm black. You may have noticed, right? There are times when the police are not really nice to black people. And I've had times when I've been harassed. And I still remember to this day being in Belgium. And I was with a friend of mine who is white. A friend of mine, Jeannie, lovely person. And we were walking down the street, right? And we needed directions. And we spoke to a Belgian police officer. And it was such a funny moment because it was one of those cases when you realize the two people can go through the same event and have a totally different experience of what happened. Because she went over, she talked to him, smiled at him, talked to him, and she remembers a lovely policeman, right? And then we left. I remember the policeman looking at me with suspicion. I remember seeing how the policeman was eyeing me up, looking if I had a gun or something like that. I remember thinking, I'm going to die. I'm going to die. This is how I'm going to die. Why did she have to ask this guy for directions? I'm going to die. I'm going to die. And while I was there terrified, thinking I'm going to die, she was like, oh, what a nice, lovely policeman. And we both had the exact same experience, but saw it in a slightly different way. So I don't know if that's a joke, but it is interesting how two people can experience something entirely different, even though it's the same moment. Okay, we move on to UA, right? This was at Nigerian Prince 915. Now, first thing I'd like to say is I really hope at Nigerian Prince 915 is an actual Nigerian Prince. I hope you didn't just take the name. I hope you're a legit Nigerian Prince. And I also know that I owe you money. I apologize. I answered that email. Oh, sorry, that's an easy joke. It's a terrible joke. I take it back. I told you the stereotypes are wrong, and look what I do. But UA, you asked for a joke about UA, but you did not explain what UA means. UA could mean a lot of things. Which UA, right? UA could mean underage. Nigerian Prince. Are you really R. Kelly? Admit it! UA could mean underactive. Are you just sitting like a slob in your flat while Corona is going on? Is that what's going on? UA? Urban mammal. It could mean urban mammal. Squirrels? Did you want to joke about squirrels? You gotta be clear about what you want to joke about. At the end of the day, I think what this UA means to me is a necessary acronym, because that's what you did. Long way to go for a necessary acronym, but I did it. The penultimate joke I am going to do is a joke about YouTube. YouTube, right now, the interesting thing about YouTube, it was suggested by Art Stewart Taylor. Now, I broadcast on YouTube, theoretically, not today, but generally I do. I've become obsessed with looking at the YouTube statistics. I've been clicking every day, seeing how many people are watching my video. I've been checking like a maniac all the time. I love YouTube, right? I watch loads of videos there, But there's a very interesting thing I didn't know. Do you know what inspired the founders of YouTube to start YouTube? Janet Jackson's nipples. Yes. Because you may remember when there was the Super Bowl incident. So Janet Jackson and Justin Timberlake were doing a song in the Super Bowl. At the end of it, Justin Timberlake reached forward and there was a wardrobe malfunction. Some people think it was a malfunction. Some people think it was intentional. And one of her breasts fell out. And one of the founders of YouTube heard about this, wanted to get the footage, couldn't get the footage, right? And so he started saying, how can I look at the footage? And this was in VHS times. He was like, did anyone tape it? How can I get the footage? Started going on a hunt. He desperately wanted to see Janet Jackson's nipples, couldn't see it, and he realized, you know what we need? We need a platform. We need a platform when people are looking for some bit of footage which has been on the news. They could just type it in our platform and it's going to be there, right? And this is what he created. Him and his friends who worked at PayPal at the time, they created YouTube based on perving after Janet Jackson. So next time, right, you're watching me on YouTube, or maybe you're watching, some video, an instructional video on YouTube or something like that, just spare a moment to thank Janet Jackson and her nipples. Final joke. On to the final subject. This is a slightly shorter show. What am I saying shorter show? It's still been 51 minutes. I clearly just talked too much. Anyway, this is the final joke. Final joke. I wanted to do a joke about April Fools, right? So this was actually suggested by @CarrieEllie. And she specifically said that she's pissed off at people posting jokes for April Fool which are insensitive. And it's true. A lot of people on April Fools do things like they will say some celebrity is dead, right? That's not a joke, okay? That's not a joke, right? Someone could see that, get depressed. Someone could, it's you can't joke about someone being dead, right? And I started thinking about it. There are acceptable pranks and there are unacceptable pranks, right? So, for example, an acceptable prank is a whoopee cushion, right? Making someone think they farted, right? Now, I know when, physical distancing, you can't really whoopee cushion someone, but you can just make the sound, right? Send them on your phone like a fart sound. So, I don't know. You can do silly things. April Fools is meant to be silly, not sinister, right? You can't be like, yeah, I'm coming over to kill you. Ha! April Fools! That's not how it works. A lot of people take April Fools way too seriously, make really stupid gags. Case in point, my father, okay? My father always used to do very insensitive and terrible April Fool's joke. Tell me, do you think it is an acceptable April Fool's gag to say to your kids, hey, you were adopted? Ha! That's not funny. I guess it was just his white man sense of humor, So with that joke, old school gag with a reveal, pullback reveal, we end this episode of Coronacast Comedy Show. If you enjoyed the show, you want to support me, you can become a Patreon. You can support me on Ko-fi. Nobody's doing it. I think I've got one Patreon and maybe 5 people. I don't mind. Please, the first month I'm fine. Eventually I'll run out of money. Then I'll be asking more desperately. But right now I've got enough savings. So just keep enjoying the show. Tell your friends. Just come watch it, please. Thank you for watching. Tomorrow, hopefully, I'll have figured out how to make these lights work. And you will see me in higher definition with more lighting. Thank you so much for watching the Coronacast Comedy Show. See ya tomorrow.